Hello.
Welcome everybody.
everyone.
Yeah, Native and Paranormal Crossroads with the Paranormal Rangers and our wonderful partner. We just kind of had a blank moment there. Dale Tobian and Laura Massey from New Teachings. We are grateful to have everybody here today. We have been discussing. It's been a while since we've talked about UFOs and our experiences and some of the teachings that go along with it. And here today we are here to talk about these subject matters for your listening. And we welcome all of our guests who are online today with us. So welcome, everybody.
Hi. Hi.
Yeah,
Good
we
to be
kind of
here.
had that deer in the headlights look for a second.
Stan was first to go alone. I was like, right, I'll do it as well.
We were on the mothership in the moment.
Yeah.
Now we're back. Has anybody have anything to share today about any experiences? I briefly have talked with Stan, and Stan had recounted a current experience he has had. And if you would like to share that, Stan, it's up to you.
I think this falls under the and more part of the title. Yeah, recently I had a couple of coins that apported here in my house, in my bedroom, which is nothing new, but it hadn't happened in quite a while. But I had, about a week ago, I had a dime that apported on like Saturday, and then in the morning, and then I had another dime almost in the exact same spot apport on Monday, almost around the same time. I photographed and documented it, but following that, one of the things I did was John has invested in some high-tech equipment for him and I to use, these little body cameras that are capable of filming in high definition, capable of filming in IR, and they're called a Bob Love body camera. Really, really nice piece of equipment. And so I use that, and I use my Sony digital audio recorder to go in and do what people normally refer to in paranormal investigation as an EVP session, electronic voice phenomenon recording. And so I went in and did that, and I have started reviewing the Bob Love video, which very soon as I started it, there was a light anomaly that I noticed in there, and so it's very interesting. It's for me, it's very exciting. The science part of it's really interesting when you start using pieces of equipment like electromagnetic meters and things like that. And so I think it feeds that curiosity side of me, with all of this, which John and I, we didn't choose to be chosen for the Navajo Rangers to investigate the paranormal. That was our chief's decision, and so it is very interesting, and there's that curiosity side of me. I do want to make a note that I did see that a if you guys have seen this, but Lou Elizondo has a book that has come out very recently about his, I guess, about UFO phenomena and things like that. I look forward to getting into that and reading upon those kind of things. So yeah, that's
So
something.
I was thinking it might be good to talk about as we're going into experience about the fear of UFOs and the fear people have and where that comes from. Because a lot of people, when you talk about UFOs, you talk about extraterrestrials, they go into fear straight away. So why don't we talk a little bit about fear and how that kind of changes perspectives and understanding of what it truly is and so on.
Well, I think media has allowed that to happen. You know, the movie industry has brought movies that depict alien life as being like, you know, aliens 1, 2, and 3, so on and so forth. And I know that you know, we get a misrepresentation of species of I would say extraterrestrial life that we don't even understand or know about. So we get taught through the media, through Hollywood, how to depict what alien life looks like. And Fire in the Sky, even though that's a, you know, in somebody's account of a true story, you know, I think when we see this type of experiences coming through television, that pretty much becomes people's perception of this is how it is. And, you know, I was going to bring a thought up about origin stories. You know, we all have an origin story. It's like Stan was just saying, we weren't asked or had the wanting to to go out and search for extraterrestrial life. It just landed on us. And when experience came to us, then we had to deal with it. You know, it's funny how he talked about Elizondo, and he changed the classification from UFO to UAP, you know, unidentified aerial phenomena as opposed to UFO um, phenomena. And it's really interesting how our classification, we keep changing the mindset of individuals. So it's kind of confusing to people when they can't understand why things are going the way they are. So that's my thoughts.
Well, for me, this idea of the change in name to UAP,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about the government, they were ridiculing people
Mm-hmm.
for decades, that they were crazy, they were seeing Venus, they were seeing, the
Swamp
moon,
gas.
whatever, swamp gas, um,
Yeah.
everything else. And then they were actually laughing about them, saying these crazy people, meanwhile, military people have been seeing UFOs all along this time. Police officers have been seeing them, and airline pilots. The pilots were afraid to report these because if you were deemed crazy, you could lose your pilot's license, and you know that's your living. So now
Mm-hmm.
you can't fly anymore. And
Right.
so there was a lot of um, pressure on people to ridicule people, other people that were seeing things. And then, it comes to the point where there's things going on that even the government and the military can't deny anymore. You know, they came up with explanations like the Roswell crash was a Project Mogul balloon. Didn't matter that Project Mogul occurred years after the Roswell uh,
Mm-hmm.
crash. That had nothing to do with it. It was just a plausible story that they could tack onto it. Oh, this was a secret thing with mannequins and high altitude balloons. And then they went from there, saying all these other stories that were just barely plausible. And unfortunately, even in politics today, we see that same attitude. you know giving you barely plausible explanations for things, and you're sitting there as a human going, "What the heck?" This is crazy. You expect me to believe that, but then there's this, I don't know if it's a mass delusion or if it's just easier to believe things like that. So the general populace, they just go along with it. So UAP was a designation so that they could take away some of the some of this background of craziness and make it sound more believable that there's something that's worth being studied. And even Skinwalker Ranch. Let's bring it right back home again. Um, for all the TV shows, and in the TV world, they go like this: stretch it out. Make it last. Don't come to the conclusion right away. You got to keep that audience on the edge. But there are some really weird things happening at Skinwalker Ranch and at other places around the United States and around the world. And we're just barely scratching the tip of the iceberg here. Um, the and hopefully we don't run into it and sink ourselves. But there's a lot going on in that world today, and so historically, that's what happened with the UAP designation.
Well,
I think one of the things
Jonathan.
you have to consider is that you look at the media,
Mhm.
and once upon a time there was a thing called newspapers that they used to get information out, and they were controlled by the companies like the Rothschilds and Carnegies and all of these very wealthy people controlled the media, and it still occurs today. Your media outlets like CNN and others are controlled by higher ups, and what goes and is disseminated in that media is controlled, and it always has been, and I would assume that it always will be. But one of the things is it's the train wrecks and plane crashes, all of the gore, the shootings and stuff. That's what sells. And
Violence.
one thing that's lumped in that is this idea of these things that are related to fear. The paranormal gets lumped in with it because people are afraid of ghosts, people are afraid of spirits and witchcraft and all of that stuff, and that's why John and I have, ever since we investigated this stuff, is to try to convey to people not to fear this stuff and to accept it for what it is. And John and I have been strong in our faith, and Michelle, and we don't give into that. We don't give into the fear side of this stuff. We know it exists, and there are certain things you have to be very cautious of when you're dealing with witchcraft and when people are dabbling with Ouija boards and things like that. You can put yourself in danger. When you knowingly go into using those kind of things. So there are things to be cautious of and be that can be hazardous. But just to fear these things like UFOs and stuff. And John and I and Michelle don't give into that. So
Well,
Well,
we
it's really interesting. This last weekend, I had an opportunity to go down to southern Utah, and I have some associates down there in the real estate business, and we were talking about this very subject of our experience that all three of us had together when we were down there before, and we jokingly, kind of flippantly, brought up the story, where one of the individuals was coaxing, us and saying, wouldn't it be cool if we saw a UFO? And we're taking a little bit of a hike down the road from where we were staying. And he kept saying that over and over again. Wouldn't it be cool if we saw a UFO? And we're out in the middle of the wilderness, right? So as we were coming back from our hike, well, he said it again. Wouldn't it be cool to see a UFO? Well, all of a sudden it looked like a helicopter coming towards us. And I said, why is that helicopter coming towards us? It was not a helicopter. It was a UFO with a light beaming down. And I got I got a really the hair on my neck started standing up. And I did fear. I know we're not supposed to fear because, this is part of what we're talking about. But when you're not used to something you haven't experienced or seen before, and I ran. I ran.
So, Michelle, can,
Well,
can
I
I
think. Go ahead,
Can,
Dale.
so you were talking about that because that came in my mind. So back, I'd say 4 weeks ago. So I was at my mum's house and I had this experience where I saw my past and I started going into my past and I saw potential futures and all of a sudden I saw this like rainbow bridge. Then it was about what 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden I heard a helicopter, and I looked to the right of my room, and I could see these different ships, but there was this one helicopter, black helicopter, just floating above. So I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit nervous because it was 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Shit's quiet, you can hear literally nothing, and I can hear a helicopter over the house. And follow the next day. I wake up, and as I wake up, that helicopter's there again, and I've got photos of it. I was sending it to Laura, like, am I going crazy, or is there a helicopter following me? Then I went to the coffee store, had a coffee, and I was like, I'm sure it's gone now. I hope it's gone. And as I went out, it's above me again. And I go see my granddad, who's 85 years old. As I'm meeting him, giving him his coffee, it's above me, and he can't see it. And I'm like, can you not see that? And my daughter Opal goes to me, Daddy, why do the helicopters follow us? And I was like, you see that, don't you? But my granddad didn't see it. So that's so beautiful that you had that experience as well.
Well, what
Well,
was really interesting about that experience, Dale, was it wasn't so much seeing the light and everything. It was the way the light it reminded me one of those Christmas lights that used to have in the 60s. Remember how they were painted on the inside,
Yeah, yeah.
Christmas lights? It had that same lighting uh, luminous to it. And I thought, this is a strange light. And I had read or somewhere had heard, do not go inside the being because most people go missing and they lose time. And I thought, am I going to be abducted? So, you know, so if you're not familiar, and that was my origin story, that was my first encounter. But I had subsequent experiences in the same area, having gone down there for business. And because we were flippantly talking about it, they never gave their description. It was only me saying, yeah, and this happened and I ran, and what happened to you guys? And and so it was like, well, we know who has our back, and it wasn't me.
Well, I think one of the things that contributes to your experience is that uh, people can manifest these kind of things. They can call in these types of phenomenon, whether it's jokingly or not. I mean, these things
Right.
are on some level. Uh, they are receiving communications, maybe even by thought. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
I like that.
in the past, John has talked about Tesla and the attributes of frequency and those kind of things, vibration, and
Harmony.
I think that I think that these things may communicate and receive and send information by means that we can't even really comprehend.
But
And
I didn't,
so
but
at
Stan,
times,
yeah,
even
I
with
did,
thoughts, I think, yeah.
but I didn't feel safe when this thing showed up. I
Yep.
felt
Well, you got to trust your gut
alarmed.
instinct. If
Yeah, yeah.
you got to trust your gut instinct ultimately in those
Hmm.
situations. You try not to fear. I mean, like what John and I have stressed, um, when we worked SWAT, John and I used to work SWAT, and
Mhm.
you'd go to a call where there's, as he says, there's weapons already involved because we're carrying firearms on our person, and but you go into situations where there's been shots fired and that kind of thing, and you try to, in that situation, control your fear. Try to, yes, you're going to have adrenaline and a whole cocktail full of chemicals running through your veins and stuff,
Right.
but you try to mitigate that and manage it to your advantage to get you through that time frame till the situation that's there is resolved. The person is either in handcuffs or there's no longer a threat. And
Mhm.
then at that point, you can take a deep breath and say, man, we got through
Mhm.
that, and even though you might have had bullets whizzing by your head or whatever. And so, yeah,
Exactly.
you do always have to, especially in the paranormal related stuff, you have to trust your gut instinct and do what that tells you to keep yourself safe.
Mm.
Well,
So as Native American,
the
go
other
on,
thing
John.
here is that we have been conditioned over
Mhm.
decades,
Mhm.
back, starting in the 50s, even before then. There were black and white. Of course, everything was black and white back then. We know
Yes.
that
Yes.
there was no
Blob.
color until 1939. So, and the Wizard of Oz came out. Then we had color. But before then, every science fiction movie that came out, there was a theme. The aliens were coming to conquer us.
Mhm.
And so they were going to come and they were going to kill everybody around them. War of the Worlds. You get the guy, walking with the Bible in his hand and saying the Lord's Prayer, and zap, he's gone. And so we're conditioned with this idea that these things are coming after us,
Right.
and here to
And therefore you need the government to save you, don't you?
Yeah,
right, right.
yeah.
Therefore you need the
Government
government,
will
and
figure
therefore
out.
then
I need classification UAPs. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they
they'll
get
have
come up
control over you.
with some magical device that can
Yeah.
counteract everything that the aliens do and shoot them out of the sky. Uh, and in fact, it's kind of funny because Roswell, they believed that a high-powered radar system was responsible for the UFO going down, and they had been testing a new radar system, and they think that that signal that was put out by that thing, the
Mhm.
microwaves that were put out, caused that ship to lose control and go down. You know,
UFOs
so
are
so
Russian technology. They were blaming
yes,
the
you
Russians.
have all this in the background that we've just been taught this way, and then you get one movie that was pro uh, alien, if you would, with Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Right.
And there's stories in the background there that said that this was supposed to be an attempt at releasing information to the public, but they just turned it into a movie. And and then it didn't help that Star Wars came out about the same time.
What year did ET come out? ET was one, wasn't it? That was a big one. Was
Yeah,
that?
ET was a little bit more on the campy side. Oh, how cute, and all this. It
Okay.
had that kind of Alf type of persona in the scripting,
That
where,
was for the
but
kids.
it did
Mhm.
show the Men in Black kind of thing,
yeah,
even with the ET, that
Yeah, you're
that
right.
there is this government entity that, and we've led into that today, is this idea of disinformation. Your
Mhm.
your three-letter government organizations and other contractors, and including organizations like NASA, you know they're the very ones that have been saying all along, oh, that's That's just like John said, swamp gas or Venus. And when in the background, they have their own science sections that are adamantly investigating and studying this stuff. They're using contractors like Bigelow and others to gather information and study these phenomenon, most likely as a means to militarize these phenomenon, whether it's witchcraft or alien technology or whatever. I think, once we stepped into the nuclear age and we're actually detonating nuclear devices, I think that adamantly drew attention from other species in the galaxy and universe, and even in other dimension. I think uh, we attracted that intention from those beings and civilizations that are out there. I think they've always been there. When you look at the pictographs and petroglyphs and stuff, you know, our good friend that's since passed, Clifford Mahudi, adamantly showed us that there are these depictions in these pictographs of clear, what appears to be craft and stuff that have been here for millennia, for a long, long time. So it's very interesting.
So, what's it on the reservations? What's their view on UFOs? Because, like you say, the Native Americans have got a long history with actually seeing UFOs and recording them in petroglyphs and so on. What is it like today on the reservations?
It's
Well,
it's very different.
yeah.
We Native Americans or Indians or however you would have it, the first peoples, we have this long-standing tradition that gods from the sky, or sky people, as
Hmm.
it's termed, have been visiting Native Americans for millennia, and so there's no big deal. A good story that represents that is that I spoke to a young girl. She went out to visit her grandmother, way out in the middle of nowhere. No electricity. There's a little hogan, which is an octagonal shaped house with mud, on the roof. And this is traditional home for Navajos.
Hmm.
And the grandmother is weaving, so she's sitting on the floor, on a dirt floor, sitting on a sheepskin, weaving a rug. And as she's weaving, the girl notices a shadow on the outside of the doorway that's open. And what she sees outside in the doorway are two silver colored discs that she says are about 6 to 7 feet in diameter. And they're just hovering there silently. And of course, they're creating shadows from the sun coming in. So, she's alarmed. And she turns to her grandmother and says, Grandma, look, there's these flying saucers outside. And the grandmother didn't even stop weaving. She just kept weaving, and she just says, yeah, they're always around here. Kind of like, what's the big deal? She never even looked. And, and this is the thing that we get all the time, is that these things are always around. We see them all the time. And we don't really want a big group of people coming out here to investigate.
Mm-mm.
Because if they investigate, they're all going to come out here. They're going to hold hands in a circle and sing "Kumbaya," and and these entities will no longer come. And these are the sky people that came to deliver knowledge to us. And if we turn them away or make it so that they don't want to come here, then what happens to us? And so this, everyone that we've spoken to, we've asked them, why don't you report this on the MUFON website? And they tell us over and over, we don't want people coming out here because these are the sky people. And so, we'll just leave it alone. They take the same attitude with Bigfoot. A lot of the elderly people say, well, yeah, he's out there, no big deal, we leave him alone, he leaves us alone. And live and let live kind of thing. And so you see this over and over again, whereas you go outside of the reservation and people see a light in the sky, and they get freaked out. They don't know what to do. They're in shock. It's a life changing experience for them. Whereas on the reservation, it's like, this is just everyday stuff. Where have you been all this time?
Well, it's an interesting question, Laura. We do have archaeological records with tribes, certain tribes. I am one of those ancestral tribes, Skidi, Pawnee. Pawnee has a lot of bands. But Skadi, which is the Wolf Clan, were the only ones that were allowed to have the buffalo skins of the record of the Star People and how they set up their agriculture, their homes. We've talked about this before. And so, I think we have bloodlines too. We haven't talked about bloodlines connected to the Star People. The ships we consider the UAPs, UFO phenomena, but we're not talking about the species or the Star People. And we may have, like Jonathan referred, we have this connection of seeing these, and maybe this was their way of communicating with the ancestors. And even today, we're seeing them being rangers. You guys have seen them. What is the link? Maybe it was like Stan was talking about with my experience down in southern Utah. The thought, even though it was kind of a joke, and then it appears, could be that frequency that we were open to that, or somebody was open to that. And then when we do have those experiences, we do become afraid because it's unfamiliar to us. And then we have been conditioned, according to what Jonathan said, to look at that particular experiential experience and look at it in the more of a fearful way. But since then, that being my origin story, I have not feared. In fact, I have welcomed them, and I have interacted with some of these entities. I've interacted with some of these UFO phenomena, and I've captured photos of it. And it's you get to the point that some of them play tricks on you, and it's very entertaining. So there's the other flip side. Have I come into contact and speaking with one? That would be wonderful. If that ever happened, that would be a phenomenon, a life-changing experience. It doesn't mean that they haven't tried. It's just, or how can we, as being this species, the humanoid that we are we ready for that type of interaction? And the Native Americans seem to have that interaction, where, like he said, she continued to weave, on her loom. And it was like, yeah, I've seen it before. And we do get that way too. In even our investigation, we're like, oh, another UFO. You do get to that point, when you're investigating, instead of like most of the populace in the world haven't seen one. And they're like, are you kidding? And so we get conditioned that way too. So we need to keep an open mind at all times.
I had
One
a
thing I think,
you
go ahead,
go.
Dale.
Oh, thank you.
I was just going to say that in relation to this, that I think in history, at times, there's references to people. They label them mediums, or they label them. They put something on them where, uh, oh my gosh, you're dabbling with something that you're not supposed to, especially from religious
Mm-hmm.
viewpoint. But I think in life there are individuals. And I think everybody that's on this particular podcast would be one of those individuals that tend to be sensitive to various energies and things, and we tend to, I think, be more open to these experiences. And people often ask me, and I'm sure they ask John, uh, how is it that you come to see these things? At times, you can have two people standing side by side, and maybe one person is hearing voices from somewhere else, from some other dimension or whatever, and the
Mm-hmm.
person that's standing right there with them don't hear anything. And maybe that's a self-preservation and protection thing on the part of those people that don't hear anything or don't see anything. I don't know, but I do tend to feel that there's some children that are more susceptible to experiencing these phenomenons than even older teens and older adults. And but anyway, just like we talked about the UFOs, and I think that some people are more apt to seeing this stuff, just like what Dale's experience was and is. And other people. I think there's people that have the blinders on and go through life, and they never see anything or experience anything. And that's the way they want it too. I think for many, because
I
John, this idea of being afraid of these kind of things, they don't want to be scared of it. They don't want to be. So,
yeah, I think some people or a lot of people probably see them and then dismiss it.
Yeah.
A
Is
lot of
that
people
real?
can have paranormal experiences and then don't trust themselves enough and then dismiss it later.
So
well, it's the house settling, it's the wind, it's
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
these other things,
yeah,
to
yeah.
so
explain it away.
So when I grew up, I was, don't get me wrong, there was a bit of part of me which was nervous about abduction because I watched X File after X File because my brother used to watch all the X Files episodes. So there was part of me what always thought there was abduction and so on. But I believe when I was about 15 or 14 years old, I woke up in the morning and there was it was like an elevator came up in a portal and this grey alien came up, but it was a rainbow coloured grey alien. It was
Mm-hmm.
like literally I could see it and it came up to me and it was with me for about an hour and I was like, I'm meant to be scared now, but I'm not scared. And it followed me around the toilet and it started putting its finger out and going around my aura
Mm-hmm.
constantly, like bathing my aura. And I was like, is this good or is this bad? Or is this going to kill me? But I was like, I had a zone of trust there, but my brain kind of was about to kick off and say, I'm scared, I need to get out of here. But there was a moment where I went into myself and realized this is a good experience. But I guess it's like, I guess it's how you get the experience set up for you. If you're in the mindset when you're not in your body, you're anxious or you're upset, then you have an experience like that, you're more likely to freak out. But I was in a really good space, and that made me realize about fear, about what the fear was, about the movies, about the abductions, and what actually my reality was. That there are obviously good things out there, a lot of good things, and like you guys, paranormal rangers, where you have to go in there without that fear because you can actually experience a moment for what it is without yourselves trying to change anything, without the fear trying to see something what's not there or trigger something, make people feel nervous around you. So that was a really cool experience and teacher for me. That
For me, I would rather, good or bad, know that these things are there,
yes,
whether it's a good experience or bad experience. Even the bad experiences allow you to put things into perspective, you know.
yes, definitely,
And like John and I have always said, in life, you have that yin yang, like in the Chinese philosophies, you have both sides of it. You can't just have all good and no evil or no negative energy. They actually uh, are being polar opposites. There's a give and take with that, and you can't have one without the other. And so for me, I would much rather, like in the experiments we've done and investigations we've done, I would rather know that something is present, something is there, than put on the blinders and pretend that doesn't even exist.
Stan, in investigation, I've gotten to the place where is it them or is it us? And when I say us, I'm thinking, because you guys talked about militarization of technologies, and I spoke to a high CIA interesting person on a scientific team, and he said, now you can't tell. You can't tell. You can't distinguish them if it's between us or them. And I thought that was a really interesting answer
Wow, that's
was
cool.
given to
Well,
you.
I think that's very true, but that internal sensor we have
Right.
in our own bodies that was given to us by our creator. It's just like knowing right from wrong. Even as a child, when we hurt a fellow student or playmate, we know that it's wrong. We don't have to have somebody tell us, oh, you're not supposed to do that. That's wrong. We know in our heart that if we hurt somebody or say something that hurts somebody's feelings, we know that it's wrong. And I think that similar ability, the innate ability we have, we know whether it's of earthly origin or government created things or something that is otherworldly or something that's not of this planet. I think we know that.
Yeah,
So that
in my experience, to kind of give some idea of how some of this works, I've seen UFOs. 1984 was the first major sighting that I had, and this was a huge cigar-shaped craft that was traveling about 15 miles an hour over some railroad tracks. And I watched it, and
Hmm.
I can remember having an intense curiosity. I was about 200 yards away from it.
Hmm.
And if I could have, I would have walked up to it if it landed and knocked on the side and said, "Can I have a ride?" I mean, that curiosity was there. And all through my life, I've seen UFOs, all different types. And there's always that curiosity that's there. And yet in the year 2000, we did a major investigation for Bigfoot up on the San Juan River. And as we were coming back from that investigation, I was driving down the road at 2 in the morning near a place called Indian Wells on
Hmm.
Route 15. And I had a large orb, about maybe a little bigger than a basketball, start following me. It was green. Started following my truck. And as I would go over these hills, it would pop up behind me, on the hills. And 2 in the morning, and you're the only vehicle out there, you start looking pretty intently in your rear view mirror. And I remember thinking, well, I'm armed. I've got a shotgun. I've got a carbine. I've got a pistol. Should I turn around and confront it? And something inside me just said, no, just keep on driving, just ignore it. And so it followed me for about 15 miles. And it veered off to the left over a barbed wire fence where there's no cattle guard or no gate, and went out onto the top of a mesa and turned red. Now, I always tell people that I got a little concerned and I started to feel uneasy. And that was the first and only time I've ever felt uneasy with something like this. And I started thinking about, why was I uneasy? And I think that usually when you see a UFO, it's pretty ambiguous. You see something streaking across the sky, you see something hovering. Um, it's not really personal. You know, I mean, you might be pretty close to it, but it's not personal. Whereas in this case, I realized that this thing was actively following me and had a curiosity about me.
Hmm.
And then I started to feel that maybe this isn't good. Especially, and then we're taught we're at colors, right? Green is good, red is bad. And when this thing turned red, now I understand that there's a difference. There's in plasma physics, the colors denote different drives of the power that's being involved. And when you see something fluoresce and get brighter, that power is being put to that craft to do whatever it needs to do. And then it slowly goes back to whatever color it was originally. Um, so anyway, that was my experience with that. Is just this really creepy, uneasy feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't slam down on the gas and try to race or get crazy about it. I just kept going, and then it eventually faded out and disappeared.
Wow.
It followed me a total of 30 miles.
Well,
So
John, you've had the experience of witnessing orbs as a child that were red in color that was related to witchcraft, and so I think, in our mind, when we're seeing things that might appear roughly similar, and when you talked about the colors and the correlation between maybe the meaning behind those colors, it's fascinating to me.
yeah, Navajo witchcraft. They often say that when they can run at really incredible speeds and cover incredible distances, overnight or just in a short time. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had police officers telling me that these things ran so fast that they were like a blur. And I've had people tell me that at 65 and 70 miles an hour driving down the road, these things ran right next to their vehicles and, in a humanoid type of form. So they often say that when a skinwalker is traveling, that it displays a red light. And you can see that light, moving around and bobbing and weaving, through the trees. And that's what I saw as a kid.
Wow.
So that stuck with
It's
me. And there might be some kind of racial thing going on, tribal thing where, you associate that past experience with this object turning red and, realizing that it could be a skinwalker. Um, but,
also, John, remember you had the experience of doing the interview and of this person that claimed to be a witchcraft shapeshifter, and he described his vision went into a red spectrum, and that's kind of interesting.
yeah,
Uh,
the red shift denotes uh, everything around you slowing down. So now you're running faster, and this guy also said that your vision actually becomes blurry and you can't really see like we normally do. So and your thinking becomes animalistic. You don't think in terms of human thinking anymore. You're more of an animal thinking. And so I thought those were rather interesting. This is a kid that was practicing this for years and decided to talk to me and Stan and have this conversation about what he experienced. Um, and then remember, with UFOs, we tend to look at things based on our lifetime experiences. So, if you grew up going to church, I grew up going to church. Church for us was an all day thing. You stayed there from the morning all the way into the night. And you had all kinds of little clubs and things going on, and basketball and volleyball. It was a Native American church in Los Angeles. And so your thoughts immediately are this is this demonic? Are these angels? Are
Mm-hmm.
these,
Your spiritual conditioning.
because you immediately fall back on what you've been taught growing up. And so, we actually have people that contact us and they tell us, "Oh my God, you guys are going to hell. You need Jesus Christ." And you're dealing with demonic activity. And we're actually out there to help people deal with a lot of this, and we have. Stan worked a case where, they had an exorcism of a place, and they didn't have any major things happen for 8 months afterwards. Whereas medicine men that did ceremonies there,
Mm-hmm.
three of them in the past, they only lasted a couple of months. So, there's evidence that, yeah, there's activity that may be demonic in nature and evil, but we put those labels on it themselves.
Right.
Well, the devil isn't depicted in a blue suit or a green suit, with the horns and
the horns, yeah.
it's a red suit. So
Yeah,
maybe
well,
there's something to that.
but then Scripture itself tells us in Doctrine of Man and Angels that um, angels are beautiful beings, that they were created by God, and that they rebelled and fell. So when you get into the looking into the doctrine of angels, these are beautiful beings, rivaling the most beautiful angels that you can imagine. And Scripture even says that they can imitate beings of light and come to you and confuse you that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it says you have to be wary. You have to know your Bible, is what it says, and be able to test it. So yeah, but please don't get a hold of us and say you're going to hell and all this stuff. Um, we have our faith, and you call it Jesus and God, we call it our Creator. It's all the same thing. And when you have that kind of faith, um, it protects you. And that's what we use it for. I pray through Jesus, um, because I'm a born again Christian. But it doesn't matter. It's the intent that you have here on how you comport yourself and what your moral values are.
Well, I think one of the things too is that, like on this particular podcast and the work that John and Michelle and I have done, it's not done in a way to sensationalize all of this stuff.
No.
Even the book that I wrote, it's not there to sensationalize those particular events and incidents. It's basically telling people that, this is what I experienced, and these were the cases that we investigated. It is what it is. A lot of it we don't have any answers for. It is what it is, and uh, we're open to other people's interpretation of it, and hopefully people will take that information and go back and research and study it and formulate an idea for themselves of what they understand all of this stuff to be. So
Absolutely. And we want to show some photos. Dale and I have some photos. We want to quickly go through this and then move on. This was caught in the Uinta Basin. That is a UAP UFO that I caught. And I'm sorry that you can see around this area and that area, there are spaceships right there.
Wow.
I caught that with my phone camera one evening, and they were in formation actually. So that was really fascinating. I hope it. I could have blown it up, but it took away the resolution when I started to blow that up. But that's it, completely original. I hope you might see. It looks like two vessels, but they were copper shaped. They were copper in color.
Wow.
That's one event. The other one, this was taken in the national forest, the Petrified National Forest in Northern California. But you can see right above me, there's an orb right above me. And inside that orb is a face, a very happy one.
Wow, that tree's beautiful as
Yeah,
well.
don't worry, be happy.
Orby. Yeah, it must have been the spirit of the tree, is how I always said. But that was taken way before I've had the UFO experiences. I was quite shocked when I got that picture, like, what is that? And we tend to do that. So, yeah, go ahead, Dale, and share yours. And then
Yeah,
did we
so
lose Laura?
as I think she was having internet. Oh no, she's gone on to no video, but she's still here. So this is the helicopter I saw first at 2 a.m. outside my house, literally right by my window atop of my house. So that followed me to my granddad's. Then as I went out to the coffee shop, I looked above the building and it was there again.
Uh-huh.
And I kept seeing this throughout the day, this black helicopter. And that was the one I saw in the morning, literally above my house. I could hear its noise, propellers. And
Hmm.
as I was reading, I was like, because I was with my daughter and I was asking my daughter, she was seeing it, and it would just appear out of nowhere. Like we'd be walking, and all of a sudden you'd
Right.
hear it. It's like just appeared from nothing, and you could hear the noise of the helicopter just go past. So that was a really cool experience. And for me, like as I felt into it, it felt like it was something galactic. This is just my perspective and understanding of how I felt it was. But it felt like it was something galactic or a ship disguised as a helicopter coming out. Um, so that was a really cool
Dale,
experience.
can you
That
show that
used to
first
happen
photograph
to
again?
me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
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 go ahead. This Dale, you know what? We used to see these on the ranch on
yes,
Skinwalker, but we would hear them, but we couldn't physically see them.
that's it.
And
Yeah,
yep, yep, and
and it
they would
used to
make,
echo. And so
yeah,
this was outside Costa Coffee. As I got my coffee, and I went out, and I was like still hovering above the coffee station.
yeah,
And I went to
yeah.
see my granddad, and as soon as I met my granddad, he was outside sunbathing, saying hello, and it was right above. And I was like, "Can you see that, granddad?" He was like, "No." And Opal was like, "Daddy, why do helicopters keep following us around?" And I was like, "You see it, great. I'm not going crazy here."
No, I understand. I had similar
Yes,
experiences
yes, yes.
around my house, and we used to have them on Skinwalker. But it was really interesting. They would come at night, and then I would
Yes.
photograph them. And you know what? There would be no helicopter, but there would be two streaks of light, and that was it.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
have those photos too, and I'd have to dig those out. But yeah, I had the same experience myself.
It's
Dale,
bizarre, isn't it? It's like it's just that off when you hear the helicopter, it doesn't sound like it is a helicopter noise, but it kind of rattles through you
Yeah,
differently. It's really weird, isn't it? You're like,
yeah,
what?
yeah. It is. You
hey
hear it
Dale,
like it's really close by, but then you're like, "Where is it?"
Yes, yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
and then when one evening I just got tired and I thought, "You know what? I'm gonna confront this." And it came and I didn't see anything, and then all of a sudden it was there, and then I snapped the photo, and then the only thing that showed up were these two streaks of light, and that was it.
Wow, 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 wow.
That
hey
was
Dale,
crazy.
Yes,
I
yes,
know you have had a lot of these types of paranormal experiences, UFO experiences, and stuff. Does your daughter experience those kind of things herself?
yeah. So Opal, like, I'm not. It's so weird. Opal's a very so she was like when she goes to a space, she understands the energies of the land and what the ancestral energies are, and she acts. So she goes to like she doesn't go in lifts, and she knows where places there's loads of ghosts. It's like
Mhm.
she's really in touch with her own intuition, and she like oh god, I've got a photo of her morphing into another person. Give me a few minutes. I put her on the PMF mat, and she morphed into an ancestor, and you can see her. She looks like a little person or an old grandmother. So she is, yeah, she's really in touch, Stan, with every
I
spirit,
see.
with everything. And she straight away, the helicopter, she goes, "They're coming again for us, Daddy." I was like, again, and walking down the road. And yeah, you've just twigged it in my mind. Give me 1 minute, and I'll show you this incredible picture of her morphing into something else on the mat.
Oh,
Give
Well,
wow.
us
one thing I've noticed is that so your child has that experience. John's children has unique experiences. Michelle's children have unique experiences, And
Yes.
it's interesting that people that have children tend to either be sensitive to these phenomenon or either attracting those energies and phenomenon, and that's it's very unique. So, wow.
Yes. And it reminds me of, like, I don't know what they call them, but they call different children in generations like the rainbow children, don't they? And the crystals and so on. And to see them so innocent and to have that, it's kind of like they know everything else is there and it's not no different. They don't see this reality to that reality. But it feels like when you get older, you get the imprint of money. You have to work, you have to provide, you have to have stress. Then all of a sudden you kind of get people get the life taken out of them, don't they? And they become, I'll put the suit on. I've got nothing against people who wear suits. I wear suits at times, but that kind of, like, style, if you get what I mean.
Do you own a suit, Dale?
I do actually. Yeah. Right.
That's
I've got to
cute.
get this photo for you guys. Right.
Go
I've
ahead,
got
Dale.
it. Yeah. Give me 1 minute. I found the one. Right. So I've sent it to you, Laura, and I'm going to save it on here and just put it up for everyone. I knew there was a reason why I took that photo, so I could show it on here. So Laura, I've sent you the photo of her.
Yeah, it's amazing what we I have tons of photos of UFO encounters, but this would have been perfect to put them on, but but sometimes you feel like you don't want to be a spectacle and have people like discredit, like Jonathan was talking about being Christian, you're going down the rabbit hole kind of attitude. And you in
John's
church, or you have a disease, people have done that to me as well. And
John's children has captured images of UFOs at
Oh wow.
times.
that would have been neat to have seen. That would have been wonderful.
Maybe next time, yeah,
We'll have
maybe
a
We'll do
part
another
two.
show.
Yeah, exactly. um and getting back to what we started out is, discrediting the term UAP, UFO, and the classifications. And Jonathan spoke about how average people, not military people, not rich people, people who seem to who can control the media, the masses, whatever, are having these experiences all the time. And then when they go to report it or want to talk about it for their realization, did I experience that? I mean, I went through that too. Um, does someone understand what I'm going through? And yet my reality was, what is this? What did I just experience? And so I think talking about this subject matter, we shouldn't fear, but also if you've never had the experience, you start to question yourself and your mental state. You know,
Yes.
you start to do
So
that.
I've got. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to show you a picture of her first, so you know what she looks like, to then what this photo was. So
Okay.
that's Opal there. It's just the photo of
Oh,
her.
she's beautiful.
Then, so you've got this. So this is when she sat on the mat. So I've got a zoomed in picture. You see that?
Oh,
So her face, her body, her legs have gone really long, and her face has completely morphed into yeah.
wow.
that's interesting.
So she's like an
Yeah,
It
how
almost
much
looks
her
like her
face
feet are like
morphs.
of an adult.
yes, that's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Like her face has completely changed. Like
Yeah.
the whole structure of it. Her nose is she doesn't have a pointed nose, and yeah.
Wow. Looks like
And
somebody
that's
completely
obviously
different.
there.
Wow.
But
That's
in that photograph, if you look at like the lines and the monitors, those aren't distorted or anything either. I mean the
yes,
table, so
yes.
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Was
Right.
that a little freaky to you, Dale? Was that a little fearsome in the moment?
Because of what's been happening with her when she stayed with me and Laura for 2 weeks, there was so many mystical things going on. It was just adding to the magic of her being away from her family, being able to be by herself, not around her brothers, just to show her personality. And it was, yeah, very special. And that shocked the shit out of me. It did. I was like, what? I was like, what's
I would
that?
imagine she might be an
Yeah.
indigo child, which is she's gifted
Yes.
and able to.
And you saw her, Stan and Jonathan. You saw her, didn't you? She was on. Remember on the show, just a bit
Yeah.
said hello.
Yeah.
That was her.
Oh yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So
Well-
everybody out there, you're not crazy.
Not.
No, but we are.
These things happen. Yeah, I like to think that we're eccentric, but, but we're definitely not, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs or anything like that.
What a show!
Well,
What
I
an
think
amazing show.
we're learning from even when we're in our mother's womb. We're learning. We're receiving information, and I think throughout our physical life here, it's just a constant journey of learning information, and that we'll use once we leave this. We transcend from this physical world into the next plane of existence. I think it's all a journey. It's all a continuous journey, and so I just don't think we should be afraid of it. I think we should be open to inquiry, to want to learn more, to exploration and inquiry and understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And next episode, we'll probably talk a little more. We have some theories as to where these UFOs may be coming from. And we've talked about it for years and years. We've had nothing to disprove what we've been going toward, and so we're gonna drop a little truth on you next time.
So-
Actually, in the next episode, we're going to try to get Rose Eckhoff
Oh
to
yeah,
join as special guest. And,
So
that's
can I
true.
can I just quickly show you a zoomed in photo of that, because I had a zoomed in photo of the face, just so you can see a closer one of the face there.
Wow, interesting.
So yeah, that's
Have we lost Michelle?
I think
I
so.
think
I've got a lightning storm on my doorstep here. I can hear the thunder.
Okay.
I heard that in the background.
yes.
Well, I've really enjoyed this session, this
Yeah.
particular podcast. I always do all of our podcasts, and thank you for the people that participated in the questions and things like that. And so thank you for being here. Thank you guys that do all the background stuff, the stuff we don't see to make this stuff work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and
Thank
thank
you.
you for all the people that showed up today. We're nothing without you, and so we look at it that way.
There's Stan's book. Stan's just showing you his new book.
It's coming out very soon.
It's reversed in the picture.
We'll have a show based on Stan's book. One of the
Yes,
shows.
we
We'll
will.
have a
We'll
show
do that.
book
Yeah.
party.
And we're going to ask them some really tough questions.
So it would be great if we could support the Paranormal Rangers, because they're such awesome people. You can find them at paranormalrangers.com, and they also have a Facebook page under that name, and I believe there is a membership still on the go, guys.
Yeah.
So if you want to join up. So thank you so much, everybody who tuned in, put comments in the chat. We really do appreciate that. We will be back hopefully with Michelle next week. Not so sure, because she could be traveling. But anyway,
Traveling, yeah.
yeah, we will be back next week. Dale Tobin from Symmetry of Health, and myself, Laura Massey from Two Feathers Medicine, with some more native paranormal crossroads. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Right.